You know, when we think about India's freedom struggle, we often picture protests, marches, and political giants. But today, we're talking about a weapon that was arguably just as powerful, if not more so. We're talking about the printing press. We're going to dive into how nationalist newspapers became the pen that really was mightier than the sword, forging an entire nation, one headline at a time. Let's get into it.
To get a feel for the kind of fire we're talking about, just listen to this quote. This wasn't some secret memo. This was printed right out in the open in a newspaper back in 1905. Now, why was this so explosive? Because Japan, an Asian nation, had just defeated Russia, a massive European empire. The effect was absolutely electric across India. All of a sudden, the idea of kicking out the British didn't seem like a dream anymore, and you can bet the nationalist press was there to shout that from the rooftops.
All right, here's our game plan for today. We'll start with how the press became this powerful new weapon. Then, we'll see the way it helped shape a single national identity and expose the economic drain under the British. We'll also look at its role in social reform, and then wrap it all up by looking at the legacy that India is still navigating today. Okay, let's jump right into our first section, the press as a new weapon. This is really the origin story of how a unified nationalist voice began to emerge, spreading ideas faster and farther than anyone thought possible.
So this whole idea of an Indian nation didn't just pop up overnight. The seeds were definitely being planted in the mid-1800s. But things really, and I mean really, kicked into high gear around the 1870s. That's when we see this explosion of nationalist newspapers. By the time we get to the turn of the century, these papers had become an absolute powerhouse in shaping what people thought and believed.
And here's what's so crucial to understand. These newspapers were doing so much more than just reporting the news. They were the main engine for spreading patriotism and modern ideas about politics, society, and economics. They were, without a doubt, the single most important tool for creating what you could call an all-India consciousness.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Let's move on and see how this consciousness translated into action. In our second section, we're looking at how this national identity was forged and the raw political power these printed pages really had.
So how'd they do it? Well, they had a multi-pronged attack. They were constantly hammering away at British policies. They were popularizing these, at the time, radical ideas of self-government and democracy. But maybe most importantly, they acted like a national network. They connected activists from Bengal to Bombay, allowing them to debate, organize, and create a truly national conversation. For the first time, there was a platform to put forward a unified Indian point of view.
I mean, just think about the sheer size of India. Before the press, how would a nationalist in Madras know what their counterpart in Lahore was thinking or planning? These newspapers changed everything. They became the threads that stitched together isolated pockets of resistance into one cohesive national movement. It was a game changer.
And here's a really fascinating side effect of all this. While these papers were helping build a single national identity, they were also strengthening regional ones. See, to reach everybody, they had to publish in local languages: Bengali, Marathi, Gujarati, you name it. This fueled a huge growth in regional literature and gave people a new sense of pride in their own culture, even as they were joining this larger national cause.
Now let's pivot to a crucial part of the nationalist argument, something that hit home for millions. Let's follow the money. The press didn't just fight with ideas, it fought with cold, hard economic facts.
At the absolute heart of this economic critique was the drain of wealth theory. This wasn't some fringe conspiracy. It was a powerful, detailed argument, famously laid out by Dadabhai Naoroji, and it was spread everywhere by the press. The argument was simple but devastatingly effective. Britain wasn't building India up, it was systematically sucking its wealth dry. And that was the root cause of India's widespread poverty.
And this slide just lays it out so starkly. On one side, you've got British policies, all designed to benefit the empire. On the other, you have the tragic results for India. Local industries crushed, farmers in crisis, and a cycle of poverty that seemed impossible to break. The press made sure every single person who could read understood this brutal connection.
And the main thing to take away here is that this was no accident. This was a deliberate, 200-year-long project to reshape an entire subcontinent's economy for the benefit of another country. This legacy of exploitation, first brought to light by the nationalist press, is something India is still wrestling with.
But, you know, the press wasn't just pointing fingers at the British. It also turned its sharp, critical eye inward, becoming a powerful voice for social reform and challenging some of India's oldest traditions from within.
So,
Just like the political activists used newspapers to spread ideas of self-rule, social reformers used them as their main platform. It was their way to speak directly to the public, to go around the traditional gatekeepers and argue for a more modern, more just Indian society.
And they did not hold back. I mean, look at the issues they tackled. Deeply, deeply entrenched social evils. Through powerful editorials and articles, they waged a war of ideas against practices like sati, against child marriage, and against the injustices of the caste system, forcing a national debate on topics that have been taboo for centuries.
So this massive battle for the soul of India was fought on all these fronts, political, economic, and social, right in the pages of these newspapers. And that brings us to our final section, the legacy of the pen. How does all this history from a century ago still shape India's path today?
Well, here's the bottom line. The economic problems created by the British didn't just magically vanish in 1947. The deep imbalances they built into the system, like turning India into a supplier of raw materials instead of a manufacturing power, created vulnerabilities that still challenge India's growth to this very day.
So, what's the way forward? Well, a lot of India's modern mission is about directly tackling those old colonial-era problems. It means building up local manufacturing to reverse that deindustrialization, it means helping farmers to fight rural distress, and it means working to close the huge economic gaps between different regions that were created under British rule.
Really, when you boil it all down, the goal today is to build a new kind of economy. One that's sustainable, sure, but more than anything, one that's inclusive. It's about consciously trying to undo the damage of the past to create a fairer future for every single Indian. And understanding this history is the absolute first step.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Back then, the nationalist press was the disruptive new media technology. It was used to unite a people and take on an empire. As we swim in our own ocean of social media, citizen journalism, and a nonstop news cycle, you have to ask yourself, what is our modern equivalent? And more importantly, is it being used to build us up or to tear us apart?